Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to our webinar with Mr. Mac Lake here. I'm super excited that you guys have tuned in to join us. I've kind of learned about Mac and a lot of his information regarding the leadership pipeline over the last couple of years. Got introduced to that. Mac came out with a book last year that really kind of detailed out a lot of this stuff, and I'm really excited to just bring a lot of this content to Nexus and to a lot of our partner churches as well. So Mac, thank you so much for being here, man.
Oh, so good to be with you.
Awesome. Well, welcome again. Mac, you've just kind of give us a little introduction of who you are, some of what you've done in the past. I know that you've been like a youth pastor, church planter, leadership pastor, all these different things. So give us a little snapshot of who you are.
Yeah, what Andrew's saying is I can't keep a job. So no, I grew up in a little church in West Virginia, fell in love with Jesus, fell in love with ministry, went to Moody Bible Institute, and then got into youth ministry, realized how bad I was at it. Went to seminary, went to Dallas Theological Seminary, became an associate pastor after that, planted a church, oversaw multi-site at Seacoast Church for a season and leadership development there. And then planted a church planting network, started an assessment training coaching process, and then over the past several years, I've started my own company about a year ago called Multiply Group.
Awesome, man. Very cool. Well, yeah, kind of walk us through this the genesis of what the leadership pipeline kind of looked like. I know that kind of started in the marketplace. Kind of tell a little bit of a story like that in your book, but just kind of give us an overview of how did this all kind of come to be?
Yeah. So for me, I was I was hired by Greg Surratt at Seacoast Church, large multi-site church, and it was my probably my second week on the job, something like that, first month. And Greg handed me a book called Leadership Pipeline. And I always tell people, don't go buy the book, don't read it. It's a very difficult read. It's a book written for big corporations, you know. And I read it, made my way through the book, and it transformed the way I looked at leadership development, because it gave a framework. Doesn't tell you how to develop leaders, the book doesn't do that, but it gives you a framework that leaders can flow up through your church or organization. And so Greg handed me the book and said, figure this out for the church. And so that's when I first started doing the study in leadership pipeline and fall in love with the power of the framework and the concept of it.
Interesting. How long ago was that?
Oh goodness, that was probably 15 years ago.
Good,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, about
Yeah,
15.
well, yeah. I mean, I haven't read that book. I know that you mentioned that, but I tell you, just kind of recommend this one is the multiplication effect that Mac wrote. This is probably the totally opposite of a hard read. Like I love how many, how
Short
short the chapters are. They're really nice, very accessible for leaders to pick that up and implement. But uh, yeah, man. So I'm super excited that you're here to bring this content. Why don't you kind of walk us through what is a leadership pipeline? And just from the ground up, just kind of just give us a brief overview of that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, let me back up for a second and just say this real quick. Thank you everybody for being on here, because I believe this is a season where personal development for pastors is crucial. Um, our paradigms are being challenged because of what we're experiencing with this pandemic. Our paradigms of church are being challenged. Our skills are being challenged. It's just here's one of the things when COVID-19 hit and the church service, most church services shut down. I was doing a lot of webinars during that season. I was like, guys, here's 3 things you need to watch. The level of engagement people are continuing to have with your church and the mission of your church, the level of biblical community they're experiencing, and the level and the degree which they're serving. Because if we're not careful, those 3 things are going to decline. And for some churches, that's been the case. The engagement, they've lost engagement, they've lost biblical community, small groups are disappearing, and people aren't serving. And so what this has done, it's revealed a deficiency in our discipleship system. And it's fascinating, Andrew. I ran an exercise recently with a group of churches, and I said, all right, here's what I want you to do. I said, I want you to write down in small groups, I want you to write down 3 to 5 behaviors, discipleship behaviors that you hope your people are exhibiting right now, since you're not meeting on the weekends. What are 3 to 5 you hope they're exhibiting in their life right now? And they created those and shared those. That's okay. Now, let me give you a scenario. I want you to imagine for a moment that I wave a magic wand and your attendance is back up to pre-COVID numbers and you're meeting every week and those sort of things. And so just imagine that. It's January 2021. Whew, everybody's back, got 100% back. Now, fast forward. Here's the scenario. Fast forward to January 2023. Imagine that there's an announcement made that, hey, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but all businesses, all churches are not going to be allowed to gather for a 12-month period of time. What are you going to do between now and January 2023 to prepare your people to demonstrate those discipleship behaviors? What are you going to do so that they are living the way you hope they live when the church isn't gathering? And so it's a fascinating exercise because it gets us thinking about basics of discipleship. But here's the other thing. We also have to be thinking about how we disciple leaders, because here's the other thing I'm seeing happening. Churches that are allowed to return are getting 30 to 60% back attendance, not leaders. They're getting less percentage of their leaders. And so let me just draw this real quick.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on sharing this, but so I don't have anything to show. But let's say your church was running 200 people, and all of a sudden your weekend services are down to 0, And then when they do open them up, what happens? It's a scaled regrowth. Your regrowth is scaling. So you're at 30%. Then you'll grow up to 60%, and hopefully you'll get back up to 100%. Okay. So if this is March 2020, and this is March 2021 or whatever time you want to put on that, here's the beauty of this. You still have the base of 200 people and the leadership base it took to run that. You still have their names. Church planter doesn't have that luxury, so somebody who hasn't started yet, but you have started. And so if you have 200 people, you have 200 names and you know who the leaders are. So what this allows you to do is allows you to scale your leadership up now for this eventual return of 100%. I'm working with a church here in town, and what they've done is they've taken what they call the coach level, and they have put coaches over leaders who are going, we're not ready to come back yet. And so 30% of their churches is returning, but many of their leaders are going, we're not ready yet. And so what they've done is they've put a lay coach over those leaders, and they meet with them on Zoom, they text them, they email them, they do equipping and training with them for those areas of ministries. So cool. Because they're like, hey, we're not going to let leadership development stop just because church at meeting on the weekend. So this is why I say leadership development is crucial right now in the life of the church.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really appreciate that. I think that that's definitely a huge weight to consider as we kind of move forward, and just really kind of reiterating why is it so necessary to identify and develop leaders. And so I know that a lot of our guys and a lot of our network are probably unfamiliar with you and unfamiliar with what this idea of the leadership pipeline actually is. So as you're talking about the need for this, I mean, you've kind of addressed a lot of these issues with this incredible tool called the leadership pipeline that I'm kind of drawn to as kind of a vision frame junkie with a lot of Will Mancini stuff. There's just very practical tools that are very powerful, very simple, easy to understand tools, but that are very powerful and that have a lot of depth to them. So why don't you just kind of walk us through just a first time introduction to what is the leadership pipeline? You talked a little bit about why it was created, why it's necessary already, but what is this leadership pipeline, and why is it important?
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's funny you say that, because when I created this, I called Will Mancini and said, hey, what the framework you've created for vision frame tools and process, I think I've got something for leadership development. And I flew down to Houston, showed it to him. He loved it. And
Nice.
so he's a good friend. So, yeah, so most churches, the way they're organized, or let me say this, or let me set up with two things. Number one, ask any pastor, what is your leadership development strategy? So before we get to the pipeline framework, ask any pastor, what's your leadership development strategy? Ask any youth pastor, any worship pastor, any whatever, what is your leadership development strategy? You're going to get one of two answers. We don't have one, or ours is organic, which means they don't have one. Okay. And so most churches do not have an intentional leadership development strategy. And so, nor do they have a definition of what leadership development is. And so when you don't have those two things, then you hope to develop leaders, but you don't have a strategy to develop leaders.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in the leadership pipeline process, I share a framework that helps you begin to define and articulate what your leadership development strategy is. Now, if you talk to most churches, and I do an exercise with churches, and I say, okay, here's what we're going to do. One of the early exercises I do when I'm working with them, I say, I want you to show me your structure. Okay, how's your church structured? And so you might get a children's director that oversees a nursery coordinator and an elementary director, and the Wednesday night Awana program, 20 leaders there. And then you talk to the student pastor and say, what's your structure? Well, it's me and a bunch of students. All right. And so everybody's structure looks different, and it's just a mess. And so what we do is churches structure for function, but they don't structure for development. So what the leadership pipeline says is that and I have a slide, but since I have this right here, I'll just use this. Every organization, and thus every church, should have a structured pathway for development. Okay. I don't like the term leadership pipeline. I use it to honor the guy who came up with the terminology, but I prefer leadership pathway. And some people are uncomfortable with the hierarchical structure. So I said, just put it on its side or flip it upside down. But every organization, every church should have a pathway where people are developed, or a discipleship pathway. Down here, These are people who are simply learning to lead themselves. These are people who are volunteering in your church as a greeter and usher. These are people who are attending a small group or Sunday school class, whatever you have. Okay. It's from this large pool of people that you're going to get your leaders. And so some of those people, and they're going to flow up and they're going to lead teams, or they're going to lead groups, they're going to lead children, or they're going to lead students. But they're leading somebody. They're not leading themselves, they're leading others. Now, down here at the bottom, I put a box around this and call this basic discipleship. But now we're beginning to disciple leaders. So after you learn to lead others, then you flow up and you learn to lead leaders. This is a huge missing piece of the structure in most churches. This would be a volunteer role where some churches call them coaches. You know, hey, I need you to oversee 3 to 5 coaches, but now, or oversee 3 to 5 leaders. But what you're doing now is you're providing leadership for a group of leaders. Okay. Some of those flow up and they're going to lead a department. They're going to provide visionary leadership for a department. So the student ministry, group ministry, worship ministry. And then some of those flow up and they'll begin to lead the entire organization, lead the church. And so, like I said, down here, this is basic discipleship. This is the discipling of leaders. And I draw a box around this and put church planting. This is where we get our church planters. This is how you raise church planters up from within, is you have an intentional pathway for development in your church. Now, here's what happens. If I take somebody who's in a small group and I make them a leader, and they're leading others, and then all of a sudden I go, oh, you know what, we need somebody to provide visionary leadership for our group ministry, and we jump them all the way up here. Or hey, you need to be a church planter, and we jump them all the way up here. It undermines their development. They never learned the skills necessary to lead at these other levels. They never learned to use time differently, or they didn't learn the values that are necessary at each level of leadership. And so it undermines their development. When I was at Seacoast, before we had this in place, we had put a guy who was a great small group leader at a campus, and he oversaw a campus. And I couldn't figure out why he couldn't get it. He struggled. And then I realized one day, oh, we jumped him 2 levels over in the leadership pipeline. That's why he's struggling. And so this becomes a discipleship pathway for leaders in your church. Now, the beauty of it, can I share 2 things on slide?
Yeah, possibly. You should be able to.
Let's see. Let's see if this works here. Can you
Yep.
see that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So this is the leadership pipeline. Now, once you get this in place, what it does is, can you see this full thing? What it does is down here at the bottom, it defines, this is so important, it defines the scope of leadership. So you can put labels on these over here. So you'll see team member, leader, coach, director, senior leader. You can call them whatever you want. I just got off the phone with the church. They're calling this level team builder. I love that. Some
Okay.
people might call it coordinator. But what it does, once you get your language nailed down, it gives you the scope of leadership. I'm simply leading myself or participating. Leader, they lead a small team or group of people. Coach leads a small team of leaders to provide further equipping, encouragement, and evaluation. Director provides visionary leadership for specific area ministry. Senior leadership team provides visionary leadership for the church. So now I have the scope of leadership. Andrew, what happens a lot of times, we'll put somebody up here and we'll call them our children's director. But if you look at the way they function, they're leading a small team of people.
Right.
Or they're leading small teams. So they're really not functioning at that level. So it helps us define the scope of leadership.
Yeah,
And
and you even mentioned Joe, put up that first slide just real quick, just to overview real quick with the text in there.
yep,
You talked a little bit about in your book with even smaller churches, and a lot of our context are maybe 200 people or less. A lot of the churches, and even when you're starting as a first church plant, I mean, you don't have 600 or 700 people to start with, and you might not have every one of these. Can you talk just briefly about? I mean, so you have the leading self. That's kind of the bottom. You're a volunteer leading others. I mean, you might be leading worship, or you might be teaching in the children's ministry, and then it kind of works up from there. When you're talking about a much smaller church, what does that look like? I think you mentioned there could be only like 3, maybe 4 levels of a smaller church.
four levels. Yep, 4 levels. So a church plant, I always tell them, that they should start out as a 4 level, but build the 5th level in and be ready when the growth happens or the development happens. And so what you have a choice to make, okay? And the choice is the lead leaders level and lead a ministry area. What am I going to put there? Am I going to make, let's use the term coach and director, okay?
Yeah.
When I put somebody over children's ministry as a church plant, we might have 12 kids, right? And we might have 2 leaders. So am I going to call that person my children's coach or my children's director? If I call them children's director, I recognize that this role is not functioning right now, but it's one we want to build in. But a lot of times I recommend go ahead and call them your children's coach, so that when you grow and you're ready to put somebody on staff and this is not the person, or you find somebody that can lead it as a volunteer better and it's not this person, then you just bring in a director. So for a church plant, I'd say, hey, yeah, have a small group coach, have a children's coach, worship coach. And then as we grow, we might add that director level later.
Yeah. Good, good. And this is, I mean, this is simple because it's something that naturally kind of happens, but it's is not intentionally. There's no intentional time or energy kind of put into it whenever you're talking about, because a lot of churches will have volunteers, and then there's somebody that's on staff that's like overseeing all the volunteers. But then when you get to that, maybe even in the small group setting, you have small group leaders that are leading others naturally, but then there's somebody that's coordinating all of that and is leading your small group leaders. I mean, so this is kind of naturally in place for a little bit, for a tiny bit, but yeah, kind of going forward from there. What is you were gonna go a little bit farther down your slide stuff.
Yeah. So let me show you this. This is one of the things I help churches build when they go through the process. So this is a 1-page snapshot that a pastor can have, and it's every single position that it takes to run the church. Now, what you'll notice is the language is aligned. We have, and this is so small I can't see it, but it's leaders. All the language across this is leaders. And then every ministry, here's the language. There's a small group coach, children's coach, preschool coach, whatever it is. We have coaches. All the language is aligned across here. The language at this level is directors. So at this level, all the positions we have are called directors. And so you align your language, and that's one of the powers of the leadership pipeline. You mentioned a church plant. I literally got off a phone call 10 minutes before you and I jumped on. So let me show you this. I mean, this was an actual coaching session. Okay.
Cool.
So let me show you what I did with this particular church. We have labeled their levels. This is a church plant that runs 200, pre-COVID 200. Okay. They have team members and participants, leaders, team builders. They do not have this level functioning yet, but it will be called director. So the two of them, the 2 senior leaders, are functioning at this level, but they're also functioning at this level as well. So senior leaders are here and here in the meantime. So they have. I went through with them. I said, okay, how many children do you have? 28. How many helpers do you have? 12. How many leaders do you have? 0. How many team builders do you have? 0 right now. They just lost that person. Okay. Now, how many people are in small groups? 100. Okay. How many leaders do you have? We have 10. How many team builders do you have? We have 1. Okay. That's not bad, but we need a 1-to-5 ratio. So you need 2 of these. Okay. So we need to work towards developing another one of these. Over here, we have 10 people on the worship team, 0 leaders, and 1 team builder leading the whole thing. Okay. Here's what it tells me is you've put somebody in this position that's a doer, not a developer. So this person needs to begin to develop 2 to 3 people at this leader level, and et cetera. So what it does is you can see in this church plant, they have 1, 2, 3 levels. They have 4 levels really that they're functioning with, but I'm trying to build them towards 5. And then what they do is they take the names, they take these numbers and you begin to put names in. And that's when it gets powerful.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned that. I think I was on a call with you at some point in the past where you kind of did that type of a thing, and you did that of putting names in. And initially, when you're church planting, like the senior leader or some of the launch team is in like all of those spaces, and you just have to kind of work yourself out of that role. Um, Gosh, it kind of reminded me of I don't know if you've read the E Myth Revisited or something like that, but that one of the exercises they talked about in there was kind of create your org chart, and you have to drop your name in everywhere that you would create your ideal org chart, and then you're slowly working your way out of it. It's the same type of process there.
I did that with my church plant 20 years ago, 22 years ago. I did that with my church plant. Before we started, I recruited 7 key leaders to oversee 7 ministries. And I said, guys, I need to know what roles are going to function underneath here. And they defined all that, just like that chart I showed you a while ago.
Yeah.
And then from day one, we were able to say, hey, we have 67 positions available in this church. And it's so helpful. And we knew who were in those positions, how many we needed. And what we said is, we said, we're going to be a church of this size. You always have to be thinking future. If you're a church of 200 today, and numbers aren't the big thing. I mean, you may always be a church of 200, but development's essential if you plan on growing or if you plan on multiplying, either one. And you have to do development if you're going to multiply or if you're going to add. So if you say, let's say you're a church of 200 and you go, we always want to be 200, but we want to multiply church plants. Okay, great. Then what do you want to start that church plant with? Well, we'd like to start them with 50 people. Okay, what are we doing to develop those 50 people up from within to send them out? And so, or if you go, no, we want to be a church of 300. Okay, well, then how many do you need? And you work through your numbers and you'll see how short you are. And now you know what your development goals are. I worked with a church this weekend, and one of the things we worked through was, what are your 1 year leadership development goals? What do you currently have? What do you need a year from now? Let's use this chart, work through the goals, and left, and they're very clear about how many they need. Here's the funny thing: this church planner I was working with a while ago. Oh, we need so many leaders. We need so many. I said, let's put it on paper. When we did, the burden lifted off his shoulders. Didn't need not near as many as the weight he was feeling.
Wow.
And so this is so helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm thinking one of the tensions that you kind of talk about in your book is you kind of have to choose your pain. Whenever you're walking through a process of developing something like this, and you've even mentioned it, you're a doer, a developer, and doing it is it's one of those things, like if you want to get it done right, you want to do it your way, you don't want it to fall through the cracks. Like people just gravitate towards just doing it themselves. But you talk about just choosing that pain of a lot of times that's really difficult, like just trying to like being having all those burdens and having all that stuff just on your plate, but walking through the pain of, what is it going to take to actually develop people. That's hard work to go in that and spend time talking with people and meeting with people and developing them and all that type of stuff. It's also hard work, but you just have to choose which one that is.
Mhm.
I love that. When you talk about, because I think when a lot of people say like we need more leaders, some of that conversation kind of stems from we just need more volunteers.
Right.
Like we just need to fill holes. We need warm bodies to set up chairs, to play in the worship team, to run sound, to teach children's or whatever.
Right.
How do you shift that mentality from like we just need warm body volunteers to how does maybe even this play into whenever you have higher level leaders in place, how does that actually attract maybe more volunteers and actually solve that problem?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look at the leadership pipeline, one of the things we have to recognize is when we're moving somebody to the next level, we are increasing their scope of leadership. I mean, increasing their scope of spiritual responsibility. That is so important. This is why I say I don't want somebody who's been a small group leader all of a sudden to go plant a church. They've not led people spiritually at these levels. And so when we just have plug the seats and get people doing these tasks mentality, we don't have a development mentality. We're going to miss people's calling. There are people who will be called into full-time ministry, perhaps, or called to serve the church in a more significant way from a spiritual leadership, and we don't see it. We miss it. Therefore, these people mature to a certain level, and then eventually they look at you and go, "Yeah, hey, by the way, we're leaving the church. We're going to go to another church." Why? Because they have a vision somehow got stirred inside them that our gifts will be utilized there, will
Mm,
be appreciated there, and maybe they'll. I mean, I was just with somebody recently, and they're like, "Man, I'm 39 years old, and we talk about leadership pipeline, but man, I'm not empowered. I'm not moving up, and that person, I guarantee that person will be gone within 6 to 12 months because nobody's looking at them and going, how can we develop this person? How can we get them to the next level? How can we increase their spiritual responsibility and disciple? This is the thing, man. The church does a decent job discipling new and young believers. We don't disciple leaders. We don't disciple leaders. And I thank God for the day when a pastor of my church in Dallas, Texas, looked at me and said, "Show up in my office every Tuesday. I see something in you." I did not see myself as a leader. I was a terrible leader. He saw something in me. He said, "Show up in my office every Tuesday. I'm going to give you something to read, something to listen to. Bring your questions, and we're going to talk it through. And I'm going to help you learn to lead." And he began to disciple me in leadership. That changed my life. Changed my life. Otherwise, I would still be running around as a doer.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Can you I, I want to do two things. I want you to kind of walk us through some of the practical steps of like what does it take to identify and then develop some of this stuff. And I know you offer coaching and even online courses and all that type of stuff. And we can drop some of those resources in the chat here in a little bit. But I want you to talk about just some of the very practical steps. Like you're already saying, like you need to name and have a very consistent naming of what those are, from worship ministry to children's ministry to small group ministry, of just naming like what is a leader, what is a coach, what is a director, and just using that shared language. But what are some of those next steps of once you've identified the places, what then happens?
Yeah. Let me screen share something with you. I'm going to give you a big picture and I'm going to hit this
Yeah.
fast. Okay.
Yeah. No, I know there's a ton of content, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And honestly, I hesitate to share this part because I'm always fearful it can be frustrating, but this is the big picture. Okay. So when I take a church through the process, I want you to imagine you have somebody named Joe. And Joe says, "I want to," and I want to be in ministry. I want to plant a church one day. And you go, "Yeah, this person, I think they have the calling." Okay. Well, here's what structure does. When you define the levels of your structure and you've named them and they're aligned across every ministry, now Joe knows, regardless of what ministry he's in, he knows his next step. So people would come to me at Seacoast and they would say, "I want to be a campus pastor." I'd say, "Great. Are you in a small group?" "Yeah." "Are you leading a small group?" "No." "Well, that's your next step." "But I want to be a campus pastor." "No, no, no, no." Your next step is learn to be a leader. Okay, so that's why structure is important. The next thing is system. System is a onboarding and training process, highly intentional onboarding and training process. And that's how Joe flows from one level to the next. Most churches have an onboarding process for team members, do not have one for the rest of the pipeline. The next thing we cover is content. So, what are 3 to 5 competencies to be a leader, a team member? What's 3 to 5 competencies to be a leader, a coach, a director, a senior leader? And so now what we do, we have specific skills or competencies, and it gives you a defined discipleship pathway of specific skills you're going to train those leaders in. And that's how Joe grows from one level to the next. And then last is people. This is where we put the names in. And it's a fun exercise. You put the names in and you put an arrow up for everybody that has potential to move to the next level, an asterisk by anybody that probably doesn't, but you don't want to lose them. They're great at that level. And you put a cross beside any name of somebody that might be called into ministry. And so this is the big picture of the pipeline. And I work with churches for 8 to 12 months to help them build this out. That's what the e-course, the on-site consulting all does that. I mean, it takes time to build this out.
Right.
Now, um, the one of the big things that we have to and here's the chart that sort of shows what it would look like moving people up and putting names on there and circling the names of those who could be your trainers, who could help disciple leaders. Shouldn't always be the staff.
Right.
Leaders should be reproducing leaders. So that's the big picture.
Yeah.
But in practical terms, um, this has hit me so strong recently. I was with a large crowd the other day, and I said, "How many of you have taken a public speaking course?" Every single person in the room raised their hand. Then I said, "How many of you have taken a course on how to ask questions?" One person, and I was shocked. Discipleship is not about dumping information. And here's the problem. When we do leadership development, we think if I was training, let's pretend I was training you, Andrew, and I have this philosophy of, okay, Andrew, you need to know how to delegate. And here's how you delegate. And oh, and by the way, you need to know how to manage your time. And here's how you manage your time. And oh, and you got to care for the souls of your leaders. And here's how you do that. And I dump all that, you're not going to retain hardly any of it. But if I have a dialogue with you, it's using what I call the triad of development, knowledge. Hey, Andrew, read this article on how to manage your time and this scripture passage. Read that article, answer the questions. Okay. Now, after you read the article, practice it. I've given you 2 to 3 assignments to put it into practice. And after you put it into practice, let's get together and talk about it. Let's see what you learned. So, Andrew, I did this in front of a group of lay leaders. I do a training called How to Have Disciple Making Discussions with Leaders. So, they asked me in the middle of this thing, they said, "Hey, would you show us what's it look like?" I said, "Okay, yeah, 2 of you come up here." I got 2 volunteers walked up spontaneously, and I said, "I'm going to train them for 10 minutes." And so they gave them a mic, and I stood there for 10 minutes and I fired questions at them about uh, a specific competency. So I said, "I'm going to teach you this one skill." And I just started asking them questions. Who's the best person? It was on time management. I said, who's the best time manager you know? And they both answered. And I asked follow-up questions. Why are they so good? What makes them so good? What do you want to emulate about them? Okay. Hey, what does scripture say about time management? What do you see? How do you see Jesus managing time? And they answered that. And I said, okay, well, if Jesus did that, how would you score yourself? A, B, C, D, or F against that standard? And we talked about that. What are the biggest mistakes that people make in managing time? And they answered that, and we create a list. Okay, which one's your biggest mistake? Which one are you best at? And then, hey, what's your next step? What do you need to do this week to manage your time the way Jesus wants you to manage your time? 10-minute conversation. Both of those guys walked away going, oh, man, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now, I could have walked up on stage and taken 10 minutes and said, okay, everybody, tonight I want to teach you how to manage time. There are 3 keys to managing time. Before I do that, let me tell you a funny story. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, now point number 1 is this. Here's a scripture to illustrate it. Oh, and here's a serious story to illustrate it. Now, point number 2 is this. And I could have done the same thing for 10 minutes. Would not have near the impact. Not near the impact. One of the guys in that group came up to me after and went, thank you. I didn't know what topic you were going to choose. And you would not believe that's exactly what I'm wrestling with. And now I've got action steps to go home and apply.
Very cool.
We got to learn. So we've got to learn how to stop talking and start asking more questions to help people. And the goal when we ask questions, the goal is not discussion. That's a misconception. The goal is not discussion. The goal is discovery.
Yeah.
I was pushing those guys and asking questions because I want them to discover what their next step is as a spiritual leader. And that's leadership development.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really cool because I'm reminded of just a lot of the discovery Bible study methods that are used in disciple making movements all over the place, and they're not geared around teaching. They're geared around questions like, what does it say about God? What does it say about man? What are you going to do about it? and it's just a question-based environment, and that's just something that Jesus models. Like, people come up to him and he asks questions like, what do you want? Do you want to get better? Like, what do you, all these different things. No, that's fantastic, man. And um
When we use a lecture base, here's the problem. When we use a lecture base, we make an assumption that everybody's skill level is the same and basically at point zero. So whenever I'm asking disciple making questions, one of the early questions I ask is an assessment style question to get them to assess. I do a thing, one of my model is how to encourage the souls of your leaders. And so I'll ask them, hey, how would you score yourself on a scale 1 to 5? How would you score yourself as an encourager? Oh, 5? Okay, why do you say 5? What makes you good at? Oh, 2? Okay. I could have 2 different people that I'm discipling in the same moment. And I'm going to ask this one different questions than this one because this one said they're a 5. I got to find a way to push them to make them even better at it. And then this one, I got to help them take some small steps in improving. And so, but you can't do that when you're just a zero-based assumption and lecture. And then the other thing about this approach that I teach, it's basically apprenticing approach, is when we do a lecture-based approach, we never test for comprehension or competency. We don't know. And so, I've been signed out.
I still see you.
You still see me?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
that's
Signed out. I don't know what I was signed out of, so I'm glad I'm still here.
fine. Good, man.
All right.
Tell me a question for you real quick. What would you say to people? And I can't remember if you talked about this in your book or not. But when you're talking about developing leaders, like, obviously you have to give them an opportunity to fail. What when leaders see other leaders failing, obviously they probably relate that to them, just their lack of preparation, or just their poor performance reflecting on the senior leader. How do you fight that temptation to raise people up and give them opportunities to succeed, but also opportunities to fail, and how do you manage that tension?
The reason we struggle with people failing is we don't understand learning. Okay? So learning is a process. So I take somebody who is a small, never led a small group in their life. I stick them in a small group and say, after I've done a 2-hour turbo training thing, I stick them in a small group with 10 people on their own at their house on their own. They're crashing all over the place. They're talking too much. They're asking wrong questions. They're being offensive to people. I mean, and so failure. And so what we want to do is we want to fail in a safe place. And so that's why, again, I say we have to apprentice somebody over a semester, so that we have time to watch them, give them opportunity to learn and grow. I'm learning cartooning right now. Okay. So every year I learn a new skill in order to stay fresh and keep myself reminded how difficult it is to learn. So I'm 6 weeks into it. So every day I've got a cartoon journal, art book, and I draw every single day. I practice. I'm practicing. My son, my middle son, is an artist. He's really, really good. I'm learning cartooning for the sake of my grandkids. I want to write and illustrate a short cartoon book that I'm going to hand them on Christmas. 4 grandkids, 4 books. So that's
Right.
my goal. So the other day I sat down with my son and I said, I've been at this 5 or 6 weeks. Look, I'm watching him draw and I'm going, I wish I could do that. But he's watching me and he's going, okay, whoa. Okay, I see what you're doing wrong. Wait a minute. Whoa. Okay. All right. No, that's better. That's better. He was coaching me. He was saying, okay, let's look at that mistake. Here's why you made that mistake. And here's how you don't make that mistake. Okay. Now, a few days later, I'm teaching my grandkids cartooning. So I'm saying, okay, everybody draw a circle. They are one's 1, so he didn't do it, but the others are 3, 4, and 6. That's the circle, or draw a circle, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Now they're behind me and they're learning. I'm at the next level of learning. Jordan's at the next level of learning. learning is when your neurons in your brain make connections until you finally get it. And so, my 3-year-olds have just learned the past year or so what a circle even is, but their hands don't have the skill to draw one yet. And so it's the same with our small group leaders. We got to take time. It takes time to learn to facilitate discussion.
Yeah.
So I tell you real quick. So this weekend, I have all these lay leaders, and I give them a 1-minute article to read on how to build healthy teams. So everybody reads it. There's 3 questions. They have to answer the questions. Then I said, now you're going to disciple each other in how to build a healthy team. So I pair them up one-on-one. They have to sit across from each other. And here's the instructions. One's the discipler, the other's the disciplee. I said, now the discipler, here's the rules. I'm going to give you 7 minutes, and you're going to facilitate a discipleship discussion with that individual, helping them learn and grow this particular skill. But here's the rule. You're not allowed to make comment. You're not allowed to teach. You're only allowed to ask questions. Only thing comes out of your mouth is a question. That's it. And you have 7 minutes. So, and I had taught them how to ask questions and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, so they read the art and they start these conversations. 7 minutes. I call time. Say, okay, tell me about it. How many of you? That was the longest 7 minutes of your life. What were your struggles? I kept wanting to tell them. I kept wanting to talk. We are so geared towards that because nobody ever taught us the importance of that. Learning needs to be verbalized, not just on people.
Yeah, love that, man. No, and I appreciate the just the even the picture of when you're talking about is it your son-in-law who's a cartoonist or yeah. So he of teaching you, and then immediately you're able to teach somebody at a lower level than you, and I just love that ability. I can't remember where I saw it, but just the picture of a staircase. Like you don't have to be at the top of the staircase to lead somebody at the bottom. Like you just need to be one step ahead, and just being able to do that. And I love what the leadership pipeline just kind of illustrates that, is that like you don't have to be like elder material, you don't have to be like a director of a whatever, like you just have to be one step ahead, and this is how you do that. And it's just really, it's super simple. I'd like to just kind of open it up. If anybody watching, like y'all have questions, just please drop those in there. I'd love to be able to ask that. I did have one observation that you're a Rams fan, and that's gonna be the title of their lowest level of the leadership pipeline.
I'll help you out with that. Is that better?
Oh shoot! There you go.
Well, if that's not good, then there we go. How about that one?
Oh man, you're all over the place.
Well, what I do is I created a church plant training and assessment system. And so I buy a hat for every city that system is installed in, or a leadership pipeline. If I've done a leadership pipeline in that city, I buy a hat for that city. That way I can remember to pray for that city. So I wear a different hat every day. If you watch me on Instagram, I wear a different hat every day.
Very cool, man. That's awesome. A couple questions in regards to maybe just the specifics of a church planting just starting. So when you're moving from launch,
Question is, does Mac have loyalty issues?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. What was your question?
yeah. I have another question here. Can you talk about ways to maybe identify leaders? Like what are you looking for in leaders that are coming up?
Love that question, because what we typically do, like I had a guy in my small group one time. He came to me and said, Mac, I want to do what you do. And I said, what do you mean you want to do what I do? I want to lead a group like you. I want the way we discuss and we're learning, we're growing, and we love each other and we're serving together. I want to do that. The whole time he was saying it, I thought, you can't do what I do. You're not ready. But he bugged me so much. I finally said, okay, Roger, show up to my house 15 minutes early, plan on staying 15 minutes late. Showed up next Friday at group 15 minutes early, went upstairs. I said, okay, Roger, one of the things you have to learn about leading a small group is you got to learn how to build biblical community. Here's 3 keys to building biblical community. Let's go downstairs, watch me do it. After group, went upstairs. Roger, you saw me do those 3 things. What I do well, what could I do better? What questions do you have? What did you learn? I asked him those 4 questions. And I did that week after week after week, taught him different skills along the way. So, but here's the thing I learned from that experience. I was looking for readiness, not willingness. And most of the time we look around, we go, oh, I need a new leader. They're not ready. They're not ready. They're not ready. Oh, they're ready. And we put them in that position. And when you When you only look for readiness rather than willingness, you're only doing leadership placement, not leadership development. And you'll always have a shortage of leaders. Here's what we have to learn to do. I look for teachability, integrity, and passion. Those are three things I look for. Uh, and when I'm looking for somebody's potential. But here's the thing. We have to stop. We have to do what Jesus did. Stop looking at people for what they are today and start looking at them for what they could be 12 months from now if we invested in them. So Jesus said, hey guys, come follow me and I will show you how to be fisher of men. Jesus was making a time commitment to those men. And that's the problem with our leadership development today. We're not willing to make a time commitment in somebody that shows potential in the future. And so we wait for them to get ready rather than helping them to get ready. And that's why we have a shortage. We're just looking for readiness. And we start praying, God, please send somebody to my church that knows how to lead.
Mm.
And nothing wrong with that. But also I need to, God, show me who in my church has potential to lead. And let me look at 2 to 3 people and say, come follow me. I will make you a discipler of a small group. Come follow me. I will make you a discipler of children. Come follow me. I will make you a discipler of students. And we got to do more of that. I think our most upper level leaders in churches know very well how to do. I don't think they know how to disciple leaders.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting question. When you are launching your church for the first time, obviously you have the uh, overwhelming um, task of identifying and developing your first eldership. How do you any insights that you have, or even in this process, things to look for? What kind of coaching tips do you have for, and when somebody's looking at that level of leadership, of going from zero to leading the church, when you're for the first time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll tell you what I did when I planted. I got an outside advisory board first of men that I knew and
Right.
trusted. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I knew and trusted, and then my goal was to have elders in place by a year to 18 months. Now it depends on your culture, your climate. I was in the South, so that was easy. It may take some of you longer. If you're in Colorado or California, it might take even longer, right? And so I had an outside advisory board where I could get encouragement and wrestle through decisions and things like that. Now, in the meantime, I'm watching who in my church is responding, who has the values, who's getting the DNA, those sort of things. And then after a period of time is when we brought on 5 elders at my church. I think it was about 18 months in, I brought on 5 elders. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to draw on this because I can't, but uh, elders are not a level in your church. Okay. They're not a level in your church. I draw a box over here and I put elders over here. They're a support to the pipeline. Okay.
Interesting.
Because typically elders are somebody who is passionate about the church, passionate about Jesus, but they may not be leading at this level or this level. Now they're helping, and again, depends on how you define elders. I work with one denomination, they define elders very clearly at this level. So the elders is a level for them, okay? In my denominational background, that's not the case. And so I draw a box over here and put elders over here. So in my church, I had some elders that were small group leaders. I had elders that were like the coach level. And I had one elder that was actually on staff with us. So they were different levels, but elders in the way I defined it, support the entire leadership pipeline, but they weren't providing the leadership at a specific level. So it depends on what your background is and your view of eldership.
Yeah, interesting. Um, yeah, if anybody watching has any more questions, I don't have a ton more, other than to just kind of say, like, if people are kind of interested in learning more, getting coaching, all that type of stuff. I mean, he's got a couple different websites. I mean, you guys can go to multiplygroup.org, or check out this book. Like I said, is the multiplication effect is a great read. I know that. well, it's a super simple read. The chapters are super super short, so it's a quick grab and get through a couple chapters type of a book. I think there's like 40 chapters or something, or 35 chapters in this little book. So it's just it's super easy to read, but just very practical on how do you walk through the development of some of this stuff. But yeah, for somebody, Patrick wants to know if the book has cartoons in it. Is there
I
an
love this
illustration?
group. I love this group. My next book will not have cartoons, but I am yeah, I will have some books with cartoons in it. Let me show you something, okay?
Yeah.
COVID. One of the benefits of COVID-19 for me is I travel 35 to 45 times a year. I traveled 5 in 2020. Okay,
Wow.
so I had some time. So I created something for the leadership pipeline. Okay, so this is something called volunteer cards. You can see these at gettrainingcards.com. Volunteer cards go at this level of your pipeline. There are 19 different cards. It's a digital download. It's a one-time download. Print as many as you want. Use it for the lifetime of your church, okay? But what it is, it's an apprenticing approach, and it comes with a little workbook, how to apprentice, how to get your ushers, greeters, production team, how to get them to apprentice new people. And it gives you a little system for that. So this is volunteer cards. For this level, for your leaders, I wrote a book called Leading Others. And so leading others for the leader level is 8 training sessions for your leaders, but you don't use all 8. I've got a chart in here that shows you which ones to use with which ministries. These are training sessions that are discussion oriented, okay? They're discussion oriented. Then I've got this book for the lead leaders level. This teaches your coaches. It's 6 competencies, 6 training modules for this level. And then right now I'm writing leading departments, and it will be released this year, leading departments. In 2022, I'll write leading the church, and we'll have that available. And then the other benefit of COVID-19 is I created the entire leadership pipeline e-course videos. And so you can't just access the course. It comes with coaching because this is such a challenging thing. So it's 6 segments that you get access to, and you take your team through it. And then I do 2-hour coaching calls. Me or someone from my team does 2-hour coaching calls to follow up each segment to ensure that you get it, that you got the work done, and that sort of thing.
Awesome, man. Had a clarifying question real quick. You said you looked for 3 things in leaders: teachability, compassion, and what was the other one?
Teachability, integrity, and passion. So it's TIP. TIP.
Integrity and
Yep.
passion.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good. Um, Well, Mac, I can't thank you enough for taking some time for us. I really appreciate this tool, just the thinking and behind it. And I know that it's going to be extremely beneficial for a lot of our guys just to be able to approach some of this topic very intentionally, and rather than just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, or like what you said, we don't have one, or it's organic, which means
Yeah.
we don't have one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Also, I've got a YouTube channel with 50, 60 videos on leadership development. So
yeah.
it's Mac Lake on YouTube. If
Yeah, that's a great resource as well. I'd highly recommend that. Seen a few of those, but just some simple introduction to some of this stuff. Um, well, Mac, thank you again so much. Like I said, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to sit down with you and just hear a little bit about this. So thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
glad to do it. It's nice to see you, and wish I could have met everybody personally, but it's good spending time with you today.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.